Between late 1040 and late 1060, the Seljuk Turks, led by Sultan Alp Arslan, expanded significantly into Byzantine territories in eastern Anatolia. As the ruler of Iran, Iraq, and northern Syria on behalf of the Abbasid Caliph in Baghdad, Arslan faced challenges from his restless Turkmen nomads. Unable to accommodate their desire for more conquests within the Islamic world, he directed them towards Christian powers in the north and west. Despite a treaty between the Byzantines and Seljuks in 1055, the Turkmen continued their raids into Asia Minor. In 1064, Alp Arslan led a massive expedition into Armenia, capturing its capital An. He devastated the city, burning its churches and subjecting its population to massacre or slavery. Proceeding unopposed into Anatolia, he sacked Cappadocian Caesarea, far from the eastern frontier, pillaging and desecrating its cathedral. The Turkmen raiders extended their plunder into Anatolia, reaching regions like Cappadocia and Cilicia that had not experienced attacks for over a century. This created a situation challenging for the Byzantine regular armies to contain. Between 1068 and 1070, Emperor Romanos IV attempted to confront the Turks, but their mobility, small numbers, and numerous incursions thwarted his efforts. The Turks, adept at outmaneuvering the slower-moving imperial forces, capitalized on the declining leadership and effectiveness of the Byzantine armies compared to the era of Basil II's reconquests. Around 1071, as Romanos moved towards Seljuks, Alp Arslan sought to solidify his borders in western Armenia, capturing Manzikert and Kelat, and securing tribute from Edessa, Aleppo, and Antioch. This move aimed to fortify the western border, allowing Arslan to focus on dealing with the Fatimids to the south. At this peak, the Seljuk Turks were at their strongest, and Alp Arslan's army demonstrated exceptional mobility and effectiveness. The Seljuk military was characterized by a traditional light cavalry force hailing from the steppe, proficient in the hit and run tactic, largely eschewing body armor. These warriors typically wielded a saber and potentially a javelin, relying primarily on a short composite bow. This recurve bow, notable for its potency, enabled the Turks to unleash rapid shots in various directions from horseback, boasting a remarkable rate of up to 12 arrows per minute. The unique design of their short stirrups positioned warriors advantageously over their horses' shoulders, facilitating precise archery from mounted positions. Mounted on robust and well-trained steppe ponies, the Seljuk Turks utilized their mobility to linger just within bowshot range, striking with powerful bows before swiftly evading pitched battles. Employing the famed Parthian shot, they would strike from a distance and skillfully retreat, firing arrows backward at their pursuers. Another effective tactic was the feigned retreat, wherein the Turks would strategically withdraw, sometimes for days, luring enemies into traps or wearing them down until their formation scattered. Seizing opportune moments, the Turks would swiftly wheel around and strike when the conditions were favorable. In 1071, the Seljuk Turks exhibited exceptional strength, employing tactics that capitalized on their mobility, precision, and adaptability. Meanwhile, the Byzantine Empire faced a vastly different set of challenges, setting the stage for a pivotal clash between contrasting military strategies and capabilities. Emperor Romanos Diogenes IV, a former general, inherited a weakened Byzantine army with insufficient arms and a heavy reliance on unreliable mercenaries and undisciplined conscripts. His predecessor, Constantine Ducas X, intentionally prioritized expanding the state's civil service and renovating Constantinople, neglecting the military. Upon ascending to power, Romanos faced a crumbling eastern frontier due to neglect, prompting him to acknowledge the threat posed by the Turks and strive to prepare the army for conflict. With no significant imperial force in the east for 2 decades, Romanos spent the initial 2 years of his reign traversing Anatolia with a predominantly mercenary army, engaging small bands of Seljuk Turks with limited success. The 1068 expedition proved crucial in shoring up the defense of Syria, signaling consequences for Turk raids. Despite these achievements, Romanos' position remained precarious, leading him to assemble a formidable army comprising both native troops and a diverse array of mercenaries, including Normans, Eurasian steppe warriors, Bulgars, Pechenegs, and Agas. He brought along Andronicus, a prominent member of the Ducas family and nephew of the former emperor, as leverage against potential intrigues in the capital. Marching with an army of around 48,000 men, Romanos crossed the Bosporus to confront Alp Arslan. The Byzantine army, distinct from the Seljuk Turk forces, emphasized heavily armored soldiers proficient in both mounted lancing and archery, blending the capabilities of heavy and light cavalry. Additionally, they relied on lightly armored infantry armed with composite bows or javelins, shields, and axes for close combat. The third component consisted of heavily armored infantry in mail armor and helmets, wielding large shields, long spears, and swords organized in a phalanx formation. The theoretical strength of this Byzantine army lay in its ability to stand against any adversary. Romanus faced a series of unfortunate circumstances and made ill-informed decisions from the outset of his campaign, despite starting with the largest Byzantine army of the 11th century. He was misled about the movements of Alp Arslan and his forces. Alp Arslan had not returned to Iraq, but had instead marched towards the Armenian border via Amida and Mosul, reaching Khoi just north of Lake Hermian. There, he gathered additional cavalry from allies and vassals, amassing a formidable force. In contrast, Romanus split his army during the campaign, sending a significant portion, led by General Joseph Tracheneos, to Kelat north of Lake Van, while Romanus himself headed towards Manzikert. Tracheneos, a respected general with around 25,000 men, failed to join the battle at Manzikert for reasons that remain unclear. There are speculations of him being intimidated by the entire Seljuk army or potentially influenced by the Dukas family. Interestingly, after Romanus' death, Tracheneos was rewarded with the governorship of Antioch by the Dukas family. The absence of communication between Tracheneos and Romanus left the latter with less than half of his army, and without the crucial protection of light infantry, particularly effective against steppe warriors. Although Romanus still had more troops than the Seljuks, Alp Arslan initially had no intention of engaging the Byzantine army. After Manzikert capitulated without resistance, Romanus established his camp outside the fortress, along the banks of a tributary flowing from the Siphon Dagel. This terrain, familiar to the Turks but not to Romanus and his officers, proved disadvantageous as his army became susceptible to harassment by Seljuk bowmen. The morning following the occupation of Manzikert, likely on Wednesday, August 24th, the emperor received reports that detachments sent out for supplies towards Kelat had been attacked and repelled by Turkish warriors. To address this, Nikephoros Bryennios, the commander of the left wing, was instructed to confront and repel the raiders. However, the situation escalated as the Turkish force proved much larger than anticipated, leading to Bryennios' units being lured into ambushes and surrounded. Consequently, he was forced to retreat to the camp. Despite this, the emperor, still unconvinced that this represented the main Seljuk army, decided to dispatch a more robust cavalry force under the command of Nikephoros Basilakes, the Armenian leader and due of Theodosioupolis, to deal with the situation. However, Basilakes, disregarding Byzantine tactics regarding feigned retreats, and the strategies employed by nomadic groups, permitted his forces to engage in an unbridled pursuit of what he believed to be withdrawing Seljuk troops. Unbeknownst to him, the Turks had set up an ambush. The consequence was that Basilakes' troops suffered significant losses, were scattered in flight, and, to compound matters, Basilakes himself was taken captive. Recognizing that the Turks were more formidable than initially assessed, albeit still unaware of Arslan's proximity, Romanos then directed the entire left wing to advance and dislodge the Turks. However, the Turks had withdrawn into the foothills surrounding the plain. It wasn't until Bryennios reached the site of the ambush on Basilakes, likely around mid-afternoon, that he, from a wounded survivor, grasped the true gravity of the situation. By this time, the Turks had reinforced their position and launched a determined attack on Bryennios' division, aiming to encircle it. Responding wisely, Bryennios ordered a disciplined withdrawal, using occasional charges to cover the movement of his units. At one point, he even forced the Turks into a retreat. However, the Turks had gained the initiative, and Bryennios and his troops finally reached the safety of the imperial camp with a sense of relief. Despite being wounded, with 2 Turkish arrows lodged in the armor on his back and a spear thrust in the chest, Bryennios demonstrated resilience and was able to fight again the following day. The emperor now grasped that he was confronting the main Turkish force, and the inadequacy of his information regarding Arslan's movements became apparent. Despite preparing the army for a general assault, when positioned for the advance, the Turks had entirely withdrawn into the hill country to the southeast. Despite sending out scouts to locate them, the entire enemy force had moved out of reach, compelling the emperor to retreat to his camp. However, that evening underscored the agility and swiftness of the Turkish troops. Some of the Aga's mercenaries were outside the camp engaged in trade with local traders and merchants. In the semi-darkness, Seljuk warriors reappeared and swiftly harassed those caught off guard outside the fortifications. Panic ensued as the Aga's troops hurried back inside the camp. The confusion arose as the Agas were scarcely distinguishable from the Seljuk enemy, leading to rumors of a full-scale assault on the camp. Abruptly, the Turks vanished, and despite occasional raids throughout the night, no major attack transpired. On the morning of August 25th, another Seljuk detachment made an attempt to seize control of the river bank opposite the Roman camp. However, they were swiftly repelled by a coordinated assault from the Byzantine infantry stationed to defend the position. Shortly afterward, a substantial group of Aga's warriors defected to the Seljuks, who were their distant relatives, causing some concern that the remaining Agas might follow suit. However, they reassured the emperor of their loyalty with an oath, alleviating the worry. Subsequently, an embassy from Baghdad, representing the court of Caliph al-Muhalban, arrived at the imperial camp, expressing a willingness to negotiate. Nevertheless, Romanos insisted on conditions, including a Seljuk withdrawal, which were evidently unacceptable to the Turks, leading to the withdrawal of the embassy. Despite the challenging circumstances faced by the army, the Roman forces still held an impressive reputation, especially in pitched battles where discipline and order played crucial roles. There was a prevailing sentiment that, given the sizable troop numbers assembled and still at Romanos' disposal, the emperor had a promising opportunity to inflict a substantial defeat on the Turks if he could engage them in battle.
You can always smell an Eastern army. The stench of camels goes before them, even when they have no camels. I am sure their odd ways. Well, that alone is reason to kill them. To arms!
Shortly after the departure of the Baghdad embassy, on the morning of Friday, August 26th, the imperial army assembled outside the camp, ready to advance against the Turkish host. Nikephoros Bryennios commanded the left wing, which included his western tagmata that he had led in Asia Minor as the Dew of the West. The right wing, under Theodore Alliades, comprised the Cappadocian and presumably most other Asia Minor units. The center, led by the emperor himself, incorporated most of the guards, including the Scholai, and the Armenian heavy infantry. It is likely that the majority of the Roman heavy cavalry remaining with the main army was positioned in the center, while the Pechenegs and Agas with Romanos were deployed on the wings. Romanos, known for his sensible and cautious approach, was familiar with Turkish tactics. Consequently, the rearguard and reserve were strategically placed well behind the main force. This positioning allowed them to relieve the main line if necessary, and also to close in and cut off any enemy units attempting to encircle and attack from behind. The rearguard included elite units such as the Hetairai, regular tagmata, and possibly allied Turkish troops.
Would you dishonor your people and the gods by being unmanned by this rabble? No! I will not suffer cowards to live! I will cut down any that run! We will have victory, or we will have an honorable death!
Arslan organized his own less numerous force in a crescent formation, observing events from higher ground to the rear instead of being among the main body of troops. The Seljuk army was effectively divided into a center and two wings, with each division further comprising smaller groupings that could act independently as needed, following traditional nomadic tactics. In accordance with Eastern Roman military principles, when facing an army of mobile horse archers, it was imperative to swiftly engage the enemy in close combat to minimize casualties and attrition from long and medium-range missile attacks. The Roman force, maintaining a disciplined formation, advanced steadily with the rearguard positioned far back to safeguard the main line and flanks. The Seljuks, displaying equal discipline, persistently harassed the Roman line with arrows while consistently retreating. While the center of the Seljuk force avoided close engagement entirely, the Turkish wings took a more aggressive approach. They would swoop in to attack the Roman wings at close range before swiftly withdrawing. causing the Roman line to become increasingly disorganized. As the center, following the withdrawing Seljuks, surged forward, the wings were constrained to a slower pace due to the Turkish sallies. By mid-afternoon, the Byzantine center division had advanced to the point of overrunning the Seljuk camp, which had been emptied of its contents. The division continued to push forward, and as the afternoon concluded, the emperor's own division had reached the rougher terrain surrounding the edge of the plain over which the army had steadily progressed. Up to this point, losses appeared to be minimal. However, on the flanks, the situation was becoming challenging. The persistent arrow showers were causing significant irritation to the Byzantine forces. Driven by frustration rather than tactical wisdom or disciplined behavior, many units attempted to charge their adversaries to initiate a battle. The Turks, in response, employed a classic step tactic by feigning retreat. This maneuver drew the imperial forces into the rough terrain, where traps and ambushes were set to isolate and defeat segments of the Byzantines that lost discipline. While some cavalry detachments fell for the ruse, chasing groups of Turks into the hills and falling victim to ambushes, the majority continued marching forward. Despite the lack of opposition in front of them, the frustrated Byzantine army, driven by Romanus' desperation for victory, persisted in their movement. As dusk settled, the emperor found himself unable to engage effectively with the enemy. The connection with the wings had weakened, and his army, having left the main camp largely undefended, was highly susceptible to a swift mounted attack from behind. Furthermore, with no supplies available, continuing the advance into unfamiliar and likely prepared terrain by the enemy would have been perilous. Although his army maintained its order and coherence, Romanus recognized that an orderly withdrawal, a course of action he had previously executed in similar Anatolian campaigns, was now the only reasonable option. At this critical juncture, a tragedy unfolded. As the order to withdraw was given, the center began its retreat. However, on the right wing, some soldiers and officers misunderstood the signal, believing that the emperor had been injured or killed. The rearguard, crucial for the success of the withdrawal, was meant to cover the units falling back, ensuring a controlled and organized maneuver. Unfortunately, Andronikos Doukas, a sworn enemy of Romanos, deliberately deviated from the prescribed procedures. Instead of waiting to cover the retreat, he reversed his lines and marched back towards the camp, leaving Romanos' division exposed and the wings completely isolated. While there is one account attempting to justify this action, the majority agree that it was a deliberate act of treachery. The motive behind Andronikos' betrayal was likely to deliver the emperor into the hands of the enemy, and, perhaps, lead to his demise. Such an event would pave the way for a member of the Doukas clan to ascend the throne without contest. Concurrently, historical records indicate that Andronikos purposefully spread the rumor that the emperor had fallen, aiming to persuade the remaining divisions to abandon the battlefield. The vast plain of Manzikert lay witness to the unfolding tragedy of the Byzantine Empire. The air crackled with tension as the Seljuks, seizing the opportunity born of confusion, launched a relentless assault. The right wing crumbled like a fragile edifice, its once disciplined ranks now shattered, fleeing across the plain in disarray. On the left wing, under the command of Bryennios, there was an attempt to withdraw in order. However, the Turkish units, having successfully cut off the right wing, now swept into the rear of Bryennios' forces, forcing them to break up in flight. The once ordered battlefield descended into a maelstrom of confusion, and the very foundations of the Byzantine army seemed to crumble. The emperor, a stalwart figure amidst the pandemonium, grasped the dire reality. The original misunderstanding had unleashed a cascade of disorder, and Romanos strove to salvage the situation. He attempted to recall the fleeing units, to rally them under his banner, but his signals were swallowed by the bedlam. The central division, under the incessant hail of Turkish arrows, too began to withdraw, maintaining a semblance of order in the face of encroaching defeat. In the heart of the turmoil, the Varangian Guard, the personal protectors of the emperor, emerged as a beacon of defiance. Clad in their distinctive armor, they stood resolute, a wall of unwavering strength. With heavy axes in hand, they fought like possessed beings, cleaving through horses and men in a frenzied dance of death. Their loyalty was unwavering, their commitment unyielding. The Varangians fought with a fury that bordered on madness, their loyalty to the emperor transcending mortal limits. They were the personal guardians, the shield and sword of Romanos Diogenes, and as the battle raged on, They lived up to their legendary status. Like an unmovable wall, they shielded the emperor with their unbreakable resolve. As the encirclement tightened, the Varangian guard fought with an otherworldly determination. Each swing of their axes was a testament to their loyalty, an oath sworn in blood to protect their emperor. The air resonated with the clash of metal, the screams of the dying, and the thunderous heartbeat of a desperate empire. The Varangians, like titans of old, stood shoulder to shoulder with their sovereign. However, the odds were insurmountable. Each swing of their axes was a testament to their demi-godly strength. But even they could not break the tightening encirclement. As the battle wore on, the Varangian guard, their numbers thinning, but continued to hold their ground. The emperor fought alongside them, his sword cleaving through the tumult of war. Yet, fate dealt its cruel hand, Romano's horse fell, and his sword hand was wounded. Despite the odds, he stood defiant. In the fading light of day, surrounded by the remnants of his Varangian guard, Romanos Diogenes faced the inevitable. The once proud emperor, his spirit unbroken, finally surrendered. The Battle of Manzikert of 1071 came to a haunting close, marking the beginning of a dark chapter for the Byzantine Empire. As recounted by Michael Sellos, Arslan treated the captive emperor with unexpected leniency, sparing him from harsh treatment and even releasing him from his chains upon identification. Romanos IV, in a display of submission, kissed the ground before Arslan, and the Seljuk leader symbolically placed his boot on the emperor's neck. Despite Manzikert being a profound strategic setback for Byzantium, it did not result in the massacre that earlier historians had presumed. Modern scholars now estimate that Byzantine losses were relatively moderate, considering that many units survived the battle intact and were back in action elsewhere within a few months. Furthermore, a significant number of Byzantine prisoners of war were eventually released. Notably, all commanders on the Byzantine side participated in battle survived. While the battle itself did not immediately alter the power dynamic between the Byzantines and the Seljuks, the ensuing civil war within the Byzantine Empire worked to the advantage of the Seljuks.